Well, good morning, good afternoon, actually. I wanted to make this video with specificity about A Course in Miracles. Generally, my videos are a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and tend to circle around a broad sort of background of the subject that I'm trying to look at, and which enables for everybody to sort of be scooped in as much as possible. And people often tell me, wow, you answered all my questions in that video, even though the video may not initially seem to have been about whatever the question subject was. And that's generally, I suppose, because everything's the same thing. Like, we're always talking about singularity, about healing, and somewhere along the way you're going to get caught up in that and find yourself sort of relatable to what's being presented in some form or another. I do have people that just must be sitting there scratching their heads, and sometimes they write to me and they go, I have no clue what you're talking about, but I can't look away. And that's kind of weird, you know. But I know that. I remember I used to sit and watch videos that my teacher's teacher had made, and I could hear something. There was something there. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I could hear it, and I'm like, oh man. And even this morning, I sent something to Tyna regarding where she's at with her thing, her process, and she said she felt quite dense around her ability to listen to it and to hear it and to be able to touch with what I was talking about, which is, it's pretty normal. I mean, you're always finding yourself up against your own lack of remembering, or your own ignorance, I guess. I mean, it's a deliberate choice to forget, so it is, I guess, ignorance. But until you realize it's your ignorance in any given particular situation, you can't really hold yourself accountable to it. And in that regard, the prayer of the heart tends to be seen as somewhat ineffectual, because the lack of integrity and accountability with what you're looking at and praying about and everything isn't there. So the prayer may be always answered, but your ability to perceive the answer is limited by your integrity with the prayer. That opens the mind to receive. Like I always say, you know, you can't offer a £2 prayer for a £10 problem. You've got to get to the bottom of whatever seems to be going on for you in life and really allow yourself to feel it, which is something that, as human constructs, let's say in the dream, we don't like to do that. We don't like to feel too much. We like to feel just enough to feel good about ourselves and be peaceful on our own terms, I suppose. And but when you become totally committed to God, totally committed to love, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a big deal. It means a lot of forgiveness, a lot of work. And at some point, you know, like somewhere back here in consciousness, you already know what's required, because you got yourself into this pickle and you can get yourself out. And just because your conscious compartment of awareness isn't fundamentally aware of the depth you have to go to for healing and illumination of the mind and to remember your creator, doesn't mean that you don't remember somewhere back here. It just means that you're choosing not to. Right? So when you go through your mind training, you're constantly in, and I was talking to Dana this morning, just now actually, talking to Dana, and she wrote to me saying, oh man, what a liar I am. And to me, that's a good thing. It's like, oh, thank God you can see that you're lying and that you're sabotaging your own best interests. You finally had a moment of clarity, a moment of insight to see that you are your own worst enemy. And now you can learn to become dependent on the Holy Spirit in regard to whatever that's shown up for, and go through that process of healing without needing to worry about the fact that you're lying to yourself about it or anything. I mean, the Holy Spirit, I mean, you know, Jesus already knows you're lying. It's like you're a liar and the son of a liar, and every word that comes from the mouth of man is a lie. Let your yes be yes and your no be no, because any more than that is a deception. And you have to realize that about yourself, you know, and it's not always a nice pill to swallow, and It's often a humbling realization, but it's much easier moving forward to be able to see that you don't perceive your own best interests, and that you are getting in your own way. You are preventing, or you're trying to prevent your own awakening, whilst at the same time telling yourself that's what you want. It's this catch-22. It's like I'm telling myself I want a spiritual experience. I'm telling myself I want illumination. I want to remember my creative source. But at the same time, I've got this background program running here, which I'm somewhat unaware of, which is contradicting that, right? And it's like, that's why you have to seek for those blocks. You've got to really look in there and get in there and see what you're actually doing, not just what you're saying with your lip service and your conscious department here. It's like, holy shit. And I remember my wife one day, we were talking about something on the couch, and she had a reasonably minor meltdown, I suppose, and I asked her about it, and she said, I just realized that I don't want God, and that's an honest place. That's an honest thing to find in your own mind. That's, like coming across that in your own mind might be upsetting. It's like, holy shit, all this work I've been doing to find God or to seek truth and whatever. And the actual fact of the matter is that I don't really want it. It means that all of your efforts, not that they've been in vain, but they just haven't been really engaging with the level of honesty and integrity and everything needed, because there's been this block to allowing you to see how deep you actually have to go with stuff, right? The first block to the awareness of love's presence is the desire to get rid of peace. And I've had so many people have said to me, I don't desire to get rid of peace, I want peace. And I'm always like, well, yes, you're saying you want peace, but what's the operating program back here doing that you're unaware of, that is infiltrating and sabotaging all of your efforts in the meantime? So you've got to find those. When Jesus says seek for the blocks and find them, you've got to find those. And that's where the mind training of A Course in Miracles comes in, which is really what I wanted to talk about in this video. So I posted on my Facebook, I posted this little meme, and it's difficult to talk about because you get caught up in ideas of free will, which is illusory. There's no such thing as free will. What you do is what you're meant to do. But over the years, I've had many people who I talk to about A Course in Miracles, many people who I introduce it to it, all sorts of things like that. Many of those people, many of those associations of my own dreaming, let's put it that way, often come across, and I can't say for sure, like generally you can't judge, like it's very difficult to judge, but there's an energetic which appears as a kind of either an ignorance or a defense. And I've had the same thing I've realized in myself at times for different things. But it comes across as, oh, everyone's got their own path and everyone's path is perfect. It doesn't matter what path you take. All paths lead to God, right? And generally there is a dynamic among, especially younger women, it seems, to embrace the more romanticized sort of spiritual pathway, which tends to be through Buddhism or Hinduism or something like that, where you've got the sort of more Eastern yogic and Ayurvedic and traditions and things like that that seem to have a lot of credibility because of the age and the ancestry of the traditions, etc., and the lineage of those who promote those sorts of traditions. And there seems to be this kind of credibility as well as this kind of mystical, mysterious sort of esoteric draw into those sorts of things. Whereas if you pick up A Course in Miracles, it's beautifully written in many of its parts. And in one whole section, it's written in iambic pentameter, which is Shakespearean blank verse, in the section for They Have Come, I think, and which is towards the end. And the rest of it seems to be more focused and heavily, or it is more focused and heavily focused on mind training. And it seems to be a lot more clinical and to the point, like on the cutting edge of a knife, with regards to addressing the fundamental issues of one's own spiritual retardedness, if that's a thing, one's own spiritual dilemma, as far as the idea of following a path goes or whatever. It kind of pulls out that idea of free will from under your feet, like it pulls the rug out and it says, just do this, simply do this. Right? And a lot of people don't like to be told to simply do this. They like to figure it out for themselves, and it seems to impinge upon the idea of free will, to be given something specific to do rather than to appear to have discovered it on your own terms, and therefore be able to sort of, puff your own chest out with regard to my spiritual path. I did it myself, etc., etc. Now, in my own journey, I did it myself too, right? I reached illumination in 1997, never having heard of A Course in Miracles, by basically stumbling, staggering in and out of drug and alcohol-fueled sessions and episodes throughout my whole adult life, staggering and stumbling in and out of churches, temples, mosques, everything, talking to people, trying to find something, realizing everything was pointing in the one sort of direction, even though I couldn't put my finger exactly on it. And eventually coming to this climatic collapse point where I'd gone as far as I could go myself. It didn't matter who I spoke to, what questions I asked. There was still this missing emptiness, this sort of finality to my own efforts. And that was a traumatic, and you might say, well, it was necessarily traumatic, Dave. You had to have that to reach the dark night of your soul. And it's like, well, I don't know that for sure. It's like, had the options been given me earlier on in life, and I do remember actually, being given, some years before my awakening, a little 20-minute book, which is what we used to print out, now that I know about it, what we would print out from the healing center that I eventually attended and give out for free. And somebody had one at a party, and I was so bombed out of my brain. There was a group of us sitting on the floor, people everywhere, but sitting on the floor. And somebody came over and said, hey, look what this says. And I remember reading like one little thing, like nothing I see means anything, probably the first lesson out of the 20-minute book. And I was mesmerized. I was drawn to it. It was like it sucked me in like nothing ever before. And then somebody else snatched it out of my hand and it was gone. And then I was back to the party and forgot about it. And then some years later, collapse into that dark place. But the idea then that the path you take is the path you're meant to take and had to take, etc., seems to be very righteous and seems to be the right thing to believe in, because if all things are the activity of God, then even that must be the activity of God. However, with the advent of A Course in Miracles in 1975, and that being the new insertion of light, it's like a modern, as if a prophet, if somebody walked on the water today, listen, this is right. So if somebody walked on the water today, turned water into wine, healed the blind, the lepers, etc., 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 no matter what you were doing, no matter what spiritual path you were attending to, having had some recollection that those are the miracles of Jesus, etc., you would drop, literally. You would drop whatever you were doing and you would make a beeline directly for that person. And if you didn't, then there must be something wrong with you. And then I could offer you A Course in Miracles for that too. But it would become worldwide. It would be instantly acknowledged, universally acknowledged, globally acknowledged, and everyone who was doing anything with any regard to any spirituality. I mean, I've never met a Buddhist who hasn't enjoyed the principles of Christianity, and I've never met a Christian who hasn't enjoyed the principles of Buddhism. Same with Hinduism. When you start to see it, And people say that, well, Krishna was the first incarnation of Jesus. Possibly, yes, who knows? I don't really know. But I mean, there are certain books and certain people who've had other experiences of illuminating experiences that have showed them that. And with regards to Krishna being blue, etc., I've had experiences of that, so I can't deny it, and also in relationship to my Christian predilections, etc. And I don't call myself a Christian, but the Christ teachings, someone who follows those Christ teachings, or tries to anyway. So anyway, the Course in Miracles, if you were to look at it as an intercession, it's like consciousness as a whole, throughout everybody's efforts to date, has raised up somewhat, and the ability for the human mind, where once we would have wielded a club and fought off dinosaurs perhaps or whatever, and dragged our mate by the hair, I mean, it's a stereotypical sort of image I'm portraying here, a very simple kind of human who basically can make fire but doesn't understand the principle of fire, they just know how to make it, all that sort of thing. From going from someone like that to someone who at the cutting edge of our mindset, let's say, can understand these deeper spiritual principles and can also understand the nature of those principles in relationship to the universal and atomic level of the world at large, etc., even in an evolutionary sense, we're ready for something else. And so the Course in Miracles comes in at a point where mind is ready for it. Right? At which point, and I have to go back biblical for a second with this, when Jesus said to the Sanhedrin, I think, to the Jewish establishment, I've come to fulfill the law of Moses and bring you new commandments, right? That was his basic thing. That fulfillment of the law of Moses, right, meant that law of Moses was now done. Nobody had to continue to participate in trying to uphold those 10 commandments, etc. And Jesus simply said, look, just simply do this. We see that you can't be trusted with 10. Here's 2. Love your Lord your God with all your heart, mind, power, and soul, and your neighbor as yourself. It's like, how hard is that? Other than that, don't judge. And if you find yourself judging, just forgive. Right, so it's simple. Back onto the loving. It's simple. So, in much the same manner, then, as Jesus fulfilled the old law, as Jesus fulfilled the old obligation to those 10 commandments of Moses, now with the raising up of consciousness, albeit extremely erratically through the auspices of religious observance and whatever, the message still managed somehow to be held together and to be presented in a way that enough of us could discern what our journey with the Christ teachings actually is, rather than using the Bible as a weapon to, it's like, that's not it. So, but this whole thing, so now A Course in Miracles comes, and Jesus says, I have come to install into consciousness the plan of the teachers, right? The plan of the teachers, the time of the prophets, that's done. There is no more need for prophets. Now there is teachers, the plan of the teachers, and they are myriad, right? They are myriad, and specifically the Course was engineered and presented as a tool to be used for the Western mind, not the Eastern mind, the Western mind. So when you tell Western-minded people this, especially those who have already had this kind of romantic inclination with the Eastern traditions, there tends to be this kind of juxtaposition in theorizing what's being presented with the idea that, well, all paths are equal, all paths are the same, it doesn't matter what path you take. And it's like, well, no, all paths aren't the same. They all end up in the same place, but some are quicker and some are slower. Course in Miracles aligns itself specifically, as it was engineered to do, with the plan of the teachers, to allow people on an individual and across the board level to begin to participate in what's been termed as the celestial speed up. Okay, now that's important. That's really important, Because when you realize that time is always against you and that delay in time is tragic, you kind of almost have this simultaneous realization that you need to get through this as quickly as possible. It's not about how romantic it is and how lovely the journey is and the journey is the destination, all that crap. We've been talking about that for years. This is about getting out of hell. This is about getting out of or awakening from the dream of death and reducing the time of suffering for everyone everywhere. And dependent upon your affinity with that goal, dependent upon your understanding of the importance of that, you're either going to snap to it and be like, right, we need to be about this. I need to be about this, and I need to be consolidating my relationship with the Holy Spirit through everything I'm doing. Or you're going to be more lackadaisical about it. Oh, I don't know if I believe all that. I like my yogic things. I enjoy my practices. Well, who cares what you enjoy, really? You've been enjoying stuff all along. But if the head of the atonement, like if Jesus, who's the head of the atonement, which he is, sends a perfectly reasonable universal version of the universal curriculum in its entirety to you, for you specifically, to help you get your ass out of here and continue on with the journey of your soul, then what the heck are you diddle-daddling about with all this other stuff? That's what I always think anyway. It's like, I know that smacks of judgment, and I know it smacks of relativity and all of that sort of thing, but at some point in my own mind, I just see the reasonability of it, and I'm like, well, of course. If my intention is to, and if my goal is to save myself from endless fields of suffering, and to reduce and obliviate the time of suffering for everybody, am I thinking of everybody? Am I thinking of the whole, or am I simply thinking of myself? And if that seems to become a sacrifice, then you're not ready. If it's too much, if it seems too much to want to take on board the idea that there's a better way, a faster way, a more useful way than attempting to assimilate and integrate now old, and I'm going to say outdated, traditions and practices from other cultures and other things. It's like, well, if I can't see that, then I'm obviously not perceiving what's in my own best interests. And I'm obviously not perceiving what's in the best interest of everyone across the board, which means I'm still operating from a place of selfishness. I mean, if it was, and we always say this, I mean, I've met so many people who say to me things like, well, if it wasn't Jesus that had to take that place on the cross, I would have gladly done it. And it's like, well, you're being asked to now, not to go on the cross, but you're being asked to accept atonement for yourself right here and right now. That's what that whole thing is. The symbolic play out of the crucifixion and the resurrection. That's what you're being presented right now, right here, right now, in this moment. No other moment is there. It doesn't wait for you to go and fulfill some downward dog pose or some other, thing. And that's a very westernized tradition, idea of a yogic tradition. I know yoga really is a discipline of the mind, has nothing to do with turning yourself into a pretzel. Sorry to throw that in your lap like that, but it's true. It's funny, like we can use these ideas of spirituality in all sorts of forms and glorious arrangements to do nothing more than to delay the inevitable. I even had somebody say to me the other day, if I awaken and realize that all the world is nothing, what if I don't enjoy playing in the world anymore? It's like, what the hell are you talking about? Playing in the world, playing with the shapes, the colors, the forms, the people, the situations, and the events. If you're not done with that, if you don't see that that's the cause of suffering, is the attraction and the habituation to the cause and effect relationship that has to be maintained through holding on to that idea of separation, then you're not actually participating in anything spiritual at all. If I tell you that Right here and right now, your awakening is waiting for you. It's like it's literally being presented through this video right now in this moment. All you have to do is say yes to it. All you have to do is give up the world and follow me, to be willing to accept atonement for yourself in its entirety right here and right now. Now, who's ready to do that? If the illumination of your mind doesn't occur right here and right now, it's because somewhere back there is this running program in the background that's preventing you from being honest about saying yes to that. And that's what the mind training is for. There's nothing keeping you from illumination but your own ignorance, your own lies and deceit. And that might sound harsh, but that is the truth. And I've had to look in that mirror myself many times. As Dana is looking in that mirror of herself today. You have to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence within you. The first block is the desire to get rid of peace. The second one is the belief that the body is valuable for what it can offer, playing in the dream. The third one is the fear of death, and the fourth one is the fear of love. Right? There's no block beyond that. Well, the last block is believing that there may still be a block, but there isn't. Okay, so I always take it that if Jesus tells me it's so, then it's so. If I have a doubt about that, it only comes from my own ignorance, not from Jesus' say-so. His say-so is absolute, resolute, without doubt. He is risen indeed. Thanks for listening. Peace.